Hey guys, it's Kevin again. Happy Easter to all of you and April Fools, whichever one is more important. But of course, this review is going to apply for the former and not the latter. And as you guys know, every single year NBC does, one of these live musicals. They didn't do one last year, but they have actually done theirs a little bit earlier than usual, and that is the production of Jesus Christ Superstar. And of course, this does center on Jesus. It's basically recounting the last days of his life, as well as basically, how it all happened, how conflicted all of his disciples are, all that kind of stuff. And with this production, I'm going to be 100% honest with you, this is a very unique production for me. Mainly because with all the other ones that have come out, I have gone into, knowing the basic story, having a good idea of, the songs and things like that, and each performer. This is the first one I've gone into basically blind. It's not that I don't know of Jesus Christ Superstar. Obviously, I do. I mean, I have a very good background when it comes to theater. I've been a huge fan of it for a while now. But with this one, I actually have never seen a production of this show. I've heard some songs, but I've never seen it all the way through. So this is the freshest I've gone into any of these productions. Basically this, I went into this, like I said, almost completely blind, and this was my first exposure to this musical. And I gotta say, while this isn't a perfect production, this is still a damn good production. Jesus Christ Superstar live in concert is easily one of the best live productions we have had so far, with some incredible performers and just some really great highlights all around. But we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And this is where we get to, I think, the most controversial stuff in any of these live productions. I mean, every single live production that has come out, everyone picks on the cast. Why'd they pick this person? They were completely wrong for the part. And I have to say, I think this is one of the first ones where I don't, besides like the Wiz Live in Greece and things like that, I'm talking about for NBC, the Wiz Live. I think this is one of the only ones where I really can't see anyone that was miscasted here. I think honestly everyone did a tremendous job. But let's first talk about John Legend as Jesus. Very controversial in this role. One, because this is the first time someone's portraying Jesus, and he doesn't have the traditional long locks. He doesn't have, the beard and things like that. They portrayed John Legend as basically John Legend as Jesus. And I gotta say, I think he did a really good job here. It's a different Jesus from, what I've seen. And again, mind you, I have not seen the production. I've only seen like pictures of Jesus Christ Superstar and things like that. But it's a different type of Jesus. He's much more soft-spoken. But I thought he did a really good job at just portraying just how just kind of how overwhelmed Jesus really is. I mean, he has all this power, so many people on his side. He is, of course, God, and he wants to help these people as best he can, but he just simply can't. And you can see, throughout the musical, he starts to get to the inevitability of what's going to happen. He knows very well that he's on his last few days, and I think Legend did a very good job in this very emotional performance, especially in scenes where, he has to emote. I thought he did an incredible job with that. There is one scene in particular, just the notes that he hits are fantastic. I always have known Legend is a fantastic singer, but this makes me look at him in a whole new way. He is phenomenal as a singer, and I think he did a fantastic job in the show for sure. He was definitely very well casted, and for me, was definitely one of the many highlights here. However, easily the standout of this entire production is Brandon Victor Dixon as Judas, who also is fantastic. And Judas, of course, it is a very hard role to pull off, because you're basically, the sole reason why Jesus ends up crucified and why all these terrible things end up happening to him. but the way that Dixon portrays it, you can very well sympathize with him. He simply, he cares about Jesus and he does support him. There's just a lot of things that he wants Jesus to do that Jesus isn't really reasoning with, and he's kind of conflicted. He's kind of put into this corner and he doesn't really know what to do. And if you look at it from that lens, I think Dixon did a really great job here. You can see once he makes these choices, he really doesn't want to do that. He really doesn't want to betray Jesus, but he kind of feels as if he doesn't really have a choice. And I really did love his emotional conviction. I think he did a very good job with that. But I also think he was having a lot of fun in the role, specifically in the aforementioned Jesus Christ Superstar number. I thought honestly was one of the highlights of the night, and he absolutely killed it. He had so much urgency, and you could really feel that rage within him. Like, he really does not like what Jesus is doing, but at the same time, he does support him, and I think he did a really great job with that. You can definitely see why he has been as well recognized as he is, and I think he did a really great job here. And then Sara Bareilles as Mary Magdalene. Again, not a very hard role to pull off, but I thought she did a great job, honestly. I know the only other thing Broadway-wise she's done is Waitress, and I can see why she's received so much recognition for that show because she really is great here. It's a very quiet role. Mary doesn't have, like, a lot to do here, but it is, something that I think she did really well. I mean, throughout the show, Mary, she starts off and she's trying to calm down Jesus because he's so stressed and overwhelmed, and she's doing her best to soothe him and, alleviate some of that stress, and she does a really great job with that. But you can also see that she is clearly falling in love with him, and she's well aware that she doesn't have much time left with him, and you really do see Mary as, similar to Judas, a tragic figure. You really do. I think she did a really great job. Within this show, especially when she, I don't know how to love him. That was fantastic. I really love what Bareilles did here. And again, not really someone that I've ever seen as an actress, but after this, I definitely do want to see her more because she was really great here. And then the rest of the cast here also did a fantastic job. Norm Lewis, holy shit. I mean, this guy is probably one of the best bass type singers working today. Just, he's so convincing, though, in this role. I mean, he's someone who is very menacing, but you can also see that he is similar to Judas, very urgent. He needs something done with Jesus, and he doesn't really see another solution but to just completely rid him of this power and just to, arrest him and make sure he is condemned for what he did, and I think he did a great job. I was very impressed by him in the show. Ben Daniels, I also really did like here. I will admit, I do think he is the weakest link within the cast. There were a couple points where it did seem like he was struggling, but I thought he did do a good job, especially towards the end. He was great, but at first I did think he was a little bit shaky, but like I said, I thought he got really great towards the end. Alice Cooper. A lot of people are going to want to watch this because of Alice Cooper, and I'm going to tell you, you're going to be disappointed because he's only in one scene, and it's not like he's underused. The one scene that he's in, it's integral to the plot. It really is, but it's not anything really as big as NBC is promoting it to be, and this is not something new. This has been a common thing with NBC where they will, get these big stars to fill these roles, but their roles aren't really anything that big. They did this with, say, Uzo Aduba for The Wiz Live, or, what they did last year on A Christmas Story Live would say, and a Gestayer. I mean, they just don't do a lot with these performers, and Cooper is unfortunately one of those people. He just does not really have a lot to do here. What he has to do, he does really, really well. I don't want to spoil what he has to do, but just in general, there isn't a lot for him to do in this production, so don't expect there to be, because he is simply underused throughout all of this. And then the only other person I really want to talk about is Jin Ha as Honest, who I thought coupled with Norm Lewis was the perfect partner for him because, like I said, Cephas has this incredible deep bass, while Honest is a countertenor. There are points where he can sing really low, but some of the best moments of the entire show was the contrast between their two voices. They have so many great harmonies throughout the show. I thought they worked so well together. I was very just really pleased to see what they did with that, and I thought that contrast was so well realized. And then finally, Jason Tam as Peter, I thought also was really good. Not a ton for him to do in this show, but you can see how very similar to Judas, he is very devoted to Jesus, but unlike Judas, he doesn't want to, sacrifice Jesus that easily. He doesn't want for he doesn't want for all of them to take Jesus away. He doesn't think that's what they should do, but you can see as it goes on, he starts to kind of realize that he doesn't really have a choice. He grows very regretful of it, and I think he as well did a really great job. Everyone here was very well casted. I don't think there was a single, like I said, bad casting in the entire show, and I was very, very happy to see what everyone did here. But now let's get to what I really want to talk about, which is the directing and the writing. Now, the directing, of course, I wasn't really too worried when it came to directing, because these are from the same guys that did The Wiz Live and Grease Live, which in my opinion are the two best productions that they've done so far. This is probably the third. And I gotta say, this is probably some of the best directing I've seen for any of these productions, and solely because the fact that they didn't really change anything. And that's something that I've always really been kind of, not upset about, but just hasn't really gone well for me. I've always said, sure, if you want to change something, change it, but it always seems like they do this to cater to a modern audience and throw in all this PC stuff, like what they did in A Christmas Story. They did this as well in things like, Peter Pan Live. They did that a lot. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. There are a lot of productions they've done where they try to infuse all this modern stuff in there, and I'm glad they did not do that here. They stuck very well to source material, and this is admittedly a much more serious show than the other ones they've done, and I thought it was a really daring show for them to tackle. This is not an easy show to do, obviously, given the material, given the very dense sort of subject matter. I mean, it's hard stuff to tackle, but I think they really did an incredible job, and I think they definitely should be commended for that effort. I was very happy to see what they did with the directing, and I really couldn't be more pleased, honestly. I was elated to see what they did here. But then the writing. Now, obviously, because that being said, there isn't really much I can say about the writing other than the fact that, as I said before, this is the first time I've seen this production, and I really do love the writing to the show. It's much more human than your typical biblical type, story about Jesus would be. This is looking at it in a much more human way, and that's some of the things I really loved. Every single character is looked at a human angle. Judas, they don't try to demonize him for betraying Jesus. They more look at it as Judas was just someone who didn't believe the same stuff as Jesus and felt that something needed to be done, and he had this opportunity, and at the last second you could tell he really didn't want to do it. He didn't want to betray Jesus like that, and I really like the way they look at it here. I think it was, again, very different, but it never comes across as disrespectful. It comes across as, again, they're just looking at all these characters a human way. Same with Mary. Mary is someone who, she has this incredible song, Could We Start Again, Please, where she's just imagining if they're able to get out of this, and if they're able to just go back to the way things are, living this carefree life where everything's just great, but she's starting to realize, her hope is really dwindling, and you really do see that in that song. She's getting more and more desperate, and I thought that was very well written, things like that. Even the priests, even though the priests are the main villains of the show, you can see that they don't necessarily, hate Jesus or anything like that. They just feel that, because of other sort of frauds that they've had, Jesus is just one of them, and they do not really trust his good word. They don't feel that he has all this power, and that's because Jesus, again, he's starting to realize the inevitability of it all. And one of my favorite scenes, I have to say, of this entire show is when he goes to Jerusalem, and basically, Jerusalem is where he's done all this magic and things like that, and it's become this crime-infested town. There are prostitutes, there's drugs, there's just all kinds of terrible things going on there, and In the midst of all this chaos, there are also a bunch of a bunch of people who are suffering, and each one of them wants Jesus to help them. But the crowd starts to become so huge and just such a huge plethora of followers that he simply can't do it. And you can see he's growing more and more overwhelmed, and I think deep down he wants to help them, but he just simply can't. And I really just, that scene was just so authentic. I thought it said so much about the character, and it was probably one of my favorite scenes of this entire thing. And not just because of how great Legend was throughout the whole show, but just how well written all the characters were. I was very happy to see, and again, even some of the more comedic numbers, they're not done to mock Jesus. It's more how they're receiving him. I mean, they do make a mockery of Jesus. They really do. But that's because that is how these people are seeing him. Jesus is not showing them, how powerful of a presence he really is, simply because he's realizing that his days are numbered, and he just doesn't see how that's going to help him at all. And, he just simply he's growing weaker and weaker by the minutes. And I think they did a really great job with that in the writing. And I think there's a reason why the show is recognized as one of the greatest that Andrew Lloyd Webber has done. It's very well written. It's incredibly character driven. And I really do love every second of the writing. Now let's get to the effects in the show. The way the show was staged, I thought was brilliant, honestly, because here's something I will say about all these other shows. As good as Grease Live and, The Wiz Live were staged, they didn't really feel like Broadway shows. They felt more like simply television productions. They were trying to add this spectacle. It was much more elaborate, and one of the best things I think about this one is that it did feel like a Broadway show. It was so simplistic. It was a stage. You had a couple things going on in the foreground, but for the most part, this was on a typical Broadway stage, and to me, it felt the most like a Broadway show, and they didn't try to, make it this huge, elaborate thing just for the television production, and I thought that was very well handled, honestly. It felt like you were watching a Broadway production, and I think moving forward, this is the way to go. Just keep it simplistic. You don't have to just overdo everything. If it's required, sure, but something like Hairspray Live, I thought that they were just kind of copying off of Grease Live's success, and I'm glad to see that NBC was a lot more simplistic this time around, and I thought the staging really was phenomenal here. The costumes as well are great. Sure, a lot of them are modern day, but again, the show is making a lot of real life parallels, and it's trying to be not necessarily modern, but it's just trying to appeal. It's not trying to appeal to modern audiences or things like that. It's just a different type of vision, and I think it worked very well. And I really did love the costume, especially on the crucifixion. They handled that brilliantly. I could not see them do that scene better. The final 12 minutes are devastating. They're hopeless, but they're also very hopeful after. I mean, obviously, we know what happens with Jesus, that he is in fact resurrected, and it's incredibly well done. I love the way they handled that whole scene. I thought it was brutal. It was so emotional, and I don't think they could have portrayed that any better. I was very happy to see the way they did that. Let's talk about the one thing, though, that, with all that said, you guys would think... And then the music in the show, once again, is brilliant. I mean, it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, so obviously it's great. He's one of the greatest composers, I think, to ever be in Broadway. Maybe one of the greatest ever, honestly. And his lyrics are just so great here. The whole thing is sung through, which, again, very different from the other productions we've seen. This is the first one that is completely sung through. And, again, a very daring move, but the songs are just great. Every single one of them sticks in your head. I mean, there's so many classics here. Jether's Main. I Don't Know How to Love Him. Could We Start Again, Please? Of course, the title song. I mean, every single song sticks with you, and I thought the music was just so great here. I really did love it, and it's hard to find a highlight. To me, I think the two highlights were Jether's Main and Superstar, but again, that's just because of how great Legend and Dixon were at selling those songs. But I also did think all of Mary's songs were great. I thought all of, Pontius Pilate's, his numbers were fantastic. I thought all the stuff from the priests were great. There really wasn't one that I thought was weak. I think all of the music, it was brilliant. I think they did it perfectly. Alice Cooper's son, he totally killed, and I was just really happy to see that. So with all that said, guys, you'd have to think that this has to be one of the best, or if not the best production they've done, because I really didn't have any issues with it. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because despite the fact that this show is very well acted, very well choreographed, the music was brilliant, they did a very good job of adapting this for television, there is still one major issue, unfortunately, and that is the audio. And, look, this is not the first time this has happened, but for me, this was probably the most severe audio problems that they've ever had. So much so to the point where I literally had to go on Wikipedia to tell what was going on. And again, it's not really the actor's fault. I don't know if the mic was too low. I don't know if there was something going on with the sound system, but throughout, I'd say the whole first hour, there were so many points where, you know, as much as I do love the audience being there, which I think, honestly, you should have an audience there. It adds to the excitement. It adds to the, just epic, you know, production of it all, and it just adds to that feel. It keeps you in the moment, and I think they did a really good job with having an audience there. However, there were points where the audience was so damn loud, cheering and screaming and clapping throughout, and the audio, you know, in conjunction with the audience was so loud that it would actually overpower their voices, and you really couldn't tell what they were saying at points. And I will admit, it was quite distracting. Like, honestly, I should not have to go on Wikipedia to tell what's going on, but I had to, because the audio simply just was shit. It really was. There were so many points where I'm like, why is this audio so bad? And again, I can't really fault the actor source, because it's not really their fault. You know, it's not really their problem. Like, it's not like they knew this was going to happen. I've been in many, you know, plays and musicals in high school where, yes, there were very severe audio problems, and, you know, they found ways to work around it, and they eventually did. It's not like, you know, this was like a problem throughout the whole show. Eventually, you know, after that first hour, then the rest of the show went pretty smoothly. I'd say after the Last Supper, from there and on, it was great, but the first act had so many audio problems, and it was kind of distracting at points, and I hate to say that, but I do think it was quite distracting. Also, there were points in the show where it did seem like they didn't know if they wanted this to be a concert or a Broadway show. The whole thing with live in concert, yeah, this definitely was not that. This was a full-on production. I don't know why they were saying it was a concert. There were points, however, where they would cut back to the audience, and it's like, why are we doing this? Like, when Alice Cooper was introduced, I don't know if they just saw this guy had a really good facial expression or whatever, but they cut to his reaction, and I'm like, why are you showing me this? What is this? What does this have to do with the context of the show? Why are you keeping me out of the moment? I mean, it's just, I don't know why they did that. Also, I know we have to have commercials in the show, obviously, because of set changes and things like that, and there just isn't a way for them to not have commercials. I totally understand that, but having commercials during such a emotional and just such a moving show, I thought really undercut what was going on. Like, it felt like, oh, Jesus is dying. Now here's a commercial for Amazon X, and, you know, some commercial with John Legend. Oh, here's a commercial for Avengers Infinity War. I mean, they did not need all these commercials there. Again, I understand the point of it, but to me, I felt like they should have done more, like, you know, behind the scenes stuff, like what they did with Grease Live, where they show you how they were doing the whole production and things like that, because, again, it just undercuts so much of the emotional theatricality of it all, and I thought definitely that was, it just dwindled it just a bit. But the editing, I will say, the show was very well paced. It moved a lot brisker than, you know, was a lot more brisk than the other productions that we've had, and I think they did a really good job with that overall. So, and also, I can't believe I forgot to include them, but the ensemble in the show was spectacular, and that's been the case for most of these live musicals. I don't think I've seen an ensemble in one of these, you know, live musical productions that hasn't been great, but this is easily one of the best. You know, their enthusiasm, you could just tell they adorn Jesus, and, you know, they did a really great job with that, and it's easy to play that up, definitely, but I also love the audience participation of it all, the way that they would get the audience into it. I mean, again, as much as I do think the audience was a bit distracting at points, I definitely did enjoy how much they incorporated them into this. I mean, this was both a Broadway show mixed with a concert. It was done in a concert style, and I thought it was honestly incredibly well done. The ensemble absolutely killed it, and you know, I also loved, you know, the band being live on stage. I just thought it really just added to, again, the enthusiasm of it all, and I think they did an incredible job with that. When it really does come down to it, guys, did I really enjoy Jesus Christ Superstar? Yes, I really did. I thought this was a very well done production. I thought they definitely did a very good job at selling the characters. I thought that everyone was very well casted here. I thought the music was spectacular. The cinematography is some of the best I've ever seen in these productions, and NBC is definitely getting better at it. It's just really unfortunate they did have to have those technical problems throughout, which at many times did kind of was a distraction to the overall production. But either way, guys, I still really did love this one. I was very happy with the way this was adapted, and I'm definitely going to give Jesus Christ Superstar live in concert an A-. But overall, guys, in my review, Jesus Christ Superstar live in concert. Let me know what you guys thought of this production overall. Love your thoughts. And like I said, where this worked, it really, really worked. I thought they did a really great job with it overall. And I definitely do think NBC is getting better with these productions. I think each one has been progressively better. And I think this definitely is, right next to The Wiz, is the best one they've done. But that's it for my review. Hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.